remember. And and unfortunately, I got none of that gift. However, her superpower for me is her ability to relate to so many people across decades of ages and stages of living. People seem to flock to her just to talk, share concerns, or to seek what apparently is her sage advice. This includes me, my sister, and our friends who have sought her special power at all stages of our maturity. The older I get, the more I truly appreciate her special power and have come to realize how truly unique it is. So, on that note, let me turn the mic over to my mother, Betty Wade Carson Creasy.
I hope my body is better than mine. I just have to click on got it.
I'm trying.
In my mind. I see all my family up there on the screen. Is Ernie, my daughter. Oh, is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. There's some of my daughters. I call Ernie my daughter. There's Trudy, my daughter. Shelley. I see all of those on there just to hear me talk. And they hear me all the time. All the time. Okie doke. Where am I?
Oh.
You got it. I'm a bit nervous. I usually don't get nervous on this, but because I had so many of you people who are within my generation and on the present, the future, and remembering the past. Sheila, my oldest daughter, no longer calls me mom. Now I am the 100-year-old. And Trudy, my youngest daughter, and as they used to put me on a flight to LA or Phoenix to exchange custody, they have joint custody. And they would call each other and say, the package is on its way. As you know, I was born 100 years ago, September 25th, 1922. I am considered a product of the greatest generation, 1901 through 1927. This group was indelibly impacted by the Great Depression, which molded their children in regards to frugality. That's one of my earliest memories of my childhood. The memory of being teased about being on welfare and my father looking for work for months and being too proud to accept welfare. I was from a family of 7 children, 4 girls and 3 boys, and my mother and father. And we did suffer along with so many other folks during those days. What'd you say?
Your son-in-law is interrupting.
Oh, my focus on this essay is the challenges of learning and relating across age boundaries of 100 years. I will start with the present generation, the alphas. They're children born between 2000 through 2025. These are the youngest people in the United States and are the first group born into the 21st century. They are the first generation to be born to parents who grew up with the internet, cell phones, tablets, and the social media. They also have the many conveniences of our modern day living. They are inclined to be the most racially diverse generation, all races, creeds, religions, and lifestyles, and the most technologically adept. Generation Alpha people are the children of the Generation Z, grandchildren of the millennials, great-grandchildren of the Generation X, and so on down the line of generations of the baby boomers, and a few of the silent generation, along with the very, very few of the greatest generation. Each generation had its own contributions to make our world a better and happier one. Generation Z was focused on the social media, cyberbullying, other internet issues, and school-related violence and climate change. The baby boomers are the millennials are often linked together. They are the most relevant group serving as a bridge from the older generation to the younger ones. They are the inception of the internet, video games, and artificial intellect. It takes all these generations combined to make our world function as a happy nation. And my hope is in the Diamonds, Camaras, my granddaughters, 16 and 19, old daughters, 16-year-old daughters, 19 and 16-year-old daughters, along with the 3-year-old David and Charlie, and Tyson, my son, well, my soon-to-be 20-year-old, 17-year-old, and 17-year-old Trent, and 13-year-old Troy, my grandson's boys, and all your children in the Alpha generation as they mature mature in people we can be proud of. Think all of the many functions each and every day. Most of us deal with all of our generations. Thank you. There's a lot more that could be written about each generation, but that would be boring to you. You know who you are.
So we have a video that kind of goes over some of the characteristics of each generation. Well, how do we show that, Randy? You're going to show the video on your side. Oh. Actually, I can do it. You can change the view to speaker. To speaker, okay.
Thanks so much for watching AM Northwest this morning. From boomers to millennials and beyond, our first guest is here to help us communicate better across all ages. We welcome back the author of Human Lie Detection and Body Language 101, Vanessa Van Edwards. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So you say that each generation communicates a little bit differently.
Yeah, so we study communication patterns, and one thing we found was that there were commonalities across different age groups. And so I thought we would go through each of the generations, talk about what they value, and sort of a little communication tip for each of them.
Oh, that sounds good.
Because it's kids to parents, it's parents to kids, it's
peers,
it's young employees to older employees.
Right, good point.
You know, talking across teachers. A lot of the times we have boomer parents talking to Gen X teachers. So I thought this could be kind of a fun thing for no matter who you're talking to.
Okay, so let's start with the Gen Z.
So Gen Z, this is anyone born after 2000.
Okay.
So we're talking about kids and teenagers right now. Now, we don't know how they're going to communicate as adults, but here's what's interesting to think about. They're also called the I generation.
Oh.
For them, technology was not a choice.
Right.
It wasn't.
They've always had technology.
It wasn't if, it was just when.
Right.
It wasn't if they were going to get a Facebook, it was when. It wasn't if they were going to get a cell phone, it was when. So that means that they value very direct and entertaining communication. They have lots of communication coming at them from all different places, and usually they're in 140 characters or less. So for them, when you're communicating with them, you want to make sure it's bite-sized, and if you can, because they're younger, as fun as possible. So if you have a directive as a parent, you don't want to put it in a long lecture. right? Because they are not used to paying as close attention.
You know, when you say that, that reminds me that I've seen comments from people of that age on Facebook, and they'll say that article is too long.
Too long. Exactly. Yes. So
I don't want to read all that.
So their attention span is short, A, because they're 15 and younger, but
Right.
also because they are used to consuming content in little tiny bite-sized pieces. So if you have something important to say, keep it really short and even use their communication method. So text them,
right.
Use a shared calendar. If that's easier than saying, hey, after school you have a dentist appointment.
Right.
That's going to be much more effective because you're using how they already communicate.
Good one. Millennials.
So millennials, this is our generation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is born 1980 to 2000. And
Oh, that's not my generation.
we're gonna share it. We're gonna always be millennials.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Come on, Helen.
I was like, okay, you were really complimenting me there.
We're
okay.
millennials.
Okay.
Helen, yes. So 1980 to 2000.
Okay.
And so millennials, they're the biggest generation. There's a lot of millennials right now, and that's because it spans 20 years. Most generations are only about 15 years.
Okay.
So millennials, this is what surprises most people. They get along better with their parents than any previous generation.
And why is that?
So they think it's because they're also the boomerang generation. A lot of them are moving back
Right.
into their parents' homes because they were born during a really hard economic time. So they had to get along and rely on parents. And so they're both emotionally and fiscally tied. So if you asked boomers or Gen Xers about their parents, they did not have as nice things to say as millennials. So they do get along with their older generations.
Or what would be the communication tip?
So they value self-expression. So this surprised me. 40% of millennials have tattoos. 75% of millennials have online social media profiles.
Oh.
So they want to express themselves. So the communication tip for them is the more you can get buy-in when you're talking to them, asking their opinion, coming up with solutions together, talking things through. Talking with a millennial is much better than talking at a millennial. They really want to make sure that they put their stamp sort of on that communication or on that idea. So the more you can get buy-in, the better.
But self-expression is key there.
Yeah, the more you can honor that.
Interesting. Gen Xers.
So Gen Xers have it hard. They're also nicknamed the sandwich generation, and that's because they are sandwiched between boomers and millennials.
And they're born 1965 to 1980.
Yes, sorry, 1965 to 1980. And they have a lot of pressure coming from both sides. 47% of them have a parent who's relying on them, and they're raising a young child. So they have a lot of responsibility, and so for them, their value is actually shared responsibility. They're carrying such a heavy load that when you're communicating with them, the more you can offer help, the more you can try to make it easier for them and offer solutions, the more they're going to feel like, oh, I'm not alone. An interesting thing said that 84% of Gen Xers have parents that emotionally rely on them.
Oh, really?
So they also have a lot of connection with their parents, but that also comes with great responsibility. So the more that you can help them in your communication, the more you can take on some of their load or some of their burden, the more they're going to be grateful for your help, and the communication is going to
And does that work the same way in the job place?
Absolutely. So they are used to taking on big loads. You'll notice that Gen Xers in the workplace are always volunteering for extra projects. They're typically the one who's very responsible in getting
Even
things
though
done.
they have a lot of responsibility.
Yes, because they've been taught from a young age that they better be able to support a lot. They were also a lot of the latchkey kids. They were the ones who had both parents that were working
For the first time,
For the
yeah,
first time,
right.
so they came home. They had to make their own snack, do their own homework. So they're very responsible, but they love when they get a little bit of help.
That's really interesting. The boomers, so 1946 to 1964.
So yes, the boomers, it's interesting because when we look at boomers, they're sort of split into two groups. One group, they're in cushy retirement. They're traveling, they're enjoying their grandkids. The other group, they're in their swan song career. They're going back because the recession hit them hard. They're in their second careers or they didn't save enough. And so you have a very split group. The good news is they value the same thing. They very much value respect and tradition. Because things are changing so quickly, the way that we communicate, even the way we drive, soon we're going to have self-driving cars. When you communicate with them, the more that you can respect their life experience, as well as the way that they've always done things, the more headway you're going to make. If you try to throw what they've been doing for years out the window, they often feel disrespected. So the more that you can respect them,
That's because this is my generation, so I'm listening. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, so the more that you can respect, because they have really good ways they've been doing things. And so
Right.
a lot of the biggest mistake millennials make is they'll say, oh, I have a much newer, better, faster
Right,
way to do that.
right.
And that is the wrong way to approach that kind of communication. So the more that you can have that respect, the better.
This is fascinating.
And there's these patterns are very distinct, right?
Right.
It's very easy to see how we are able to bucket them. And when you respect how each generation communicates, I think that you have a much better relationship. And the last one,
Yeah.
this is the silent generation.
Okay.
This was anyone born before 1946. The silent generation came up between two world wars, and the reason I think that they're called the silent generation is because their needs were silenced by what the country needed during that period. So this one's easy. If you're talking with a silent generation, someone born before 1946, they've learned so much more than you.
Right.
They've lived so much longer. Communicate however they want to communicate.
Yes, good point.
Right? Just ask them a ton of questions about their life and celebrate the fact that they're here and they're talking to you. So communication goes on their terms with the silent generation.
Absolutely. Really fascinating stuff. Vanessa, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Human lie detection and body language 101, Vanessa Van Edwards.
Wait, you're a great friend.
We need you on a mic.
The millennials, I like the part about.
Okay, everybody, okay, the.
Oh, okay, this. I like the part about the millennials because that's the age of our grandchildren, and I like to think that that they're so respectful, and we feel that from them. We have a 28-year-old down to a recent high school graduate, so they're in that group.
When I was a trustee and we recruited millennials on the campus, you recruited the parents. Here's an example. A student's walking across campus talking to a professor. Professor is explaining something. The student says, "Just a moment. Here, explain that to my mom."
On his cell phone.
So I have maybe a different way of thinking about generations because my my family seems to skip generations because my parents were in the greatest generation. I'm technically a baby boomer at the very tail end of the baby boom, and my children are millennials and Gen Z. So so the concept of a generation, these generations are actually shorter than generations in my family. But one thing I've noticed is that, you think, well, these lines are kind of arbitrary, aren't they? And in fact, they defined one of the lines differently. But the millennials versus Gen Z, I like the dividing line that you have on this printed sheet better, 96, because what that does is it divides between my two older kids and my younger kid. And I see a very significant difference. Because when my older kids were in middle school, texting meant pressing the number 1 3 times to get the letter C and stuff like that. I mean, it was, and so they weren't as wedded to the technology. Whereas my youngest, who was born in 98, I mean, she had an iTouch since she was like in elementary school, and the mode of communication does seem to have changed rather significantly, just in that space, somewhere in those late 90s. And so I think it's kind of interesting to see what the defining events were that separate the generations. I mean, the greatest generation, these are people who fought World War II, right? And that's kind of dividing line between the greatest generation and the silent generation. And the reason I call myself Generation W instead of Baby Boomer, because I didn't fight Vietnam. I was a little kid. I don't remember John Kennedy getting elected. I was born in 1960. And so I think sometimes it's like what event defined those boundaries is kind of significant. And so, yeah, neat stuff. Yeah.
To be honest, to me, this whole subject is kind of like the signs of the zodiac. All Arises all act the same. All Scorpions all act the same. I don't know. I understand the differences because of what they've been influenced by. It is different than the signs of the zodiac, but I'm not sure we all fit in these categories.
I think for me, the reason the subject is interesting, or that I wanted to know more about it, is because I have a real tough time with all the technology and responding to text, and my nieces and other people will chime in a little bit later about, yes, when they're trying to communicate with me, they have to remember that I won't actually respond right away, probably to a text. And the fact that they've kind of come to understand that I'm not trying to be rude and I'm not trying to ignore them, I don't even think that way. And so I guess my mom actually manages to learn all of these new technologies and kind of sometimes communicate better than I do in my in me. Ron, obviously totally different. He communicates immediately and answers the phone all the time and all of those things. But so yes, they're all different. But I think it's kind of interesting, at least just to know, for everybody to know why certain people are doing certain things and it seems normal to them, I guess. Yeah, Mary.
Well, I can verify some of the stuff, the differences. In my last job, I would send out emails to people because, sometimes you've got these issues that you really need to talk through. I mean, I could spend an hour and a half drafting an email trying to explain in minute detail what it is, but I could call you up and, tell you in 3 minutes, this is what we've got to do. I can tell you the last 2 years I worked, I don't think I would send out emails, say, please call me about this. No one did. They never did. They would respond with either a text or an email. And I got to the point where I was really frustrated because it's like, okay, now I've got to check my voicemail. I've got to check my email. I've got to check my text. And we also had, I can't think of the name of it, but there was an inter-office thing. And for a while we were on AOL, whatever, friends and family, whatever it used to be, that you could do instant messaging. But it was crazy, but that was so true. And I felt like I was banging my head against the wall, and it was just because I was too old for these guys.
And that's been the frustration for me. It's not just, check the text, it's the email, it's the voicemail, it's it's just it's not like you can just answer a phone and then you're done with things. I mean, it's all over the place that you have to check every other day for me or something. So, yes. Oh, okay.
Shelley, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I lost the video for some reason. I can't get it back. It's not letting me get live. But anyway, if you can hear me, I just had a comment too that I've noticed with my grandchildren. They prefer to text. They don't like long conversations. And even on the phone, I can't do my wonderful chit chat conversations. They want to talk in short sentences and they want it very quickly. If we're texting, which they prefer over email, it has to be very short sentences followed by emojis. It needs to be no more than 1 or 2 sentences at a time. I can't sit there and write paragraphs or have lengthy conversations, and it drives me crazy because I can't seem to get across what I want to share, and I can't follow the information that I want back from them in 3-word sentences.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a real generational issue that I'm having with them.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to the next video. And unfortunately, the videos are a bit dated, but Mary found them for me and I was going to use that.
You'll learn the silver bullet on how best to communicate across generations. Workplace communications today are a tangled web of varying preferences. Some call, some email, and others will text while sitting right next to you. Evolving technologies have wreaked havoc on our communication choices. There has never been a greater divide between preferred communication channels than there is today. When is face-to-face better than a call? Or when is text better than an email? Or when is Slack better than Skype? The way people communicate varies by generation. According to Gallup, sending and receiving text messages is the most prevalent form of communication for Americans younger than 50. More than 2/3 of 18 to 29-year-olds say they sent and received text messages a lot the previous day, as did nearly half of Americans between 30 and 49. Young Americans are also well above average in their use of email and social media on a daily basis. Recent research shows similar trends, with emailing and calling increasing with age and texting decreasing with age. The data is clear that the younger the individual, the more likely they are to communicate using newer technologies. With such disparity, how are you to find communication cohesion in today's multi-generational workplace? The answer? Defer. Consider the communication preference of the individual you wish to communicate with and defer to their likely communication preference. We often communicate with others how we prefer to be communicated with, but the countless options for communication that now exist are forcing us to be adaptive. Since age has a strong correlation with an individual's communication preference, it's useful to use generations as a clue to what form of communication would be most efficient and impactful. For example, if a millennial employee was interested in getting in touch with a baby boomer, the millennial should consider deferring to a phone call or a face-to-face meeting. Or if that baby boomer manager wanted to get in touch with the millennial employee, deferring to a text or instant messaging may prove most effective. Certainly not a phone call. Once the connection is made, ask how the individual would prefer to communicate moving forward, and then continuously defer to that method of communication. Adjusting our communications for each generation can be exhausting, but it's a new reality we face in today's 21st century workplace. What's more exhausting is the constant miscommunication that occurs when you try to communicate with everyone based on the specific communication preference. This simple strategy will also help generations become more versed in communication skills where they lack. Millennials can become stronger offline communicators, and older generations can become stronger digital communicators. Considering one's generation, while not fail-proof, can be a quick and effective way for deciding which communication method to use. If you don't know the generation of the individual you're going to communicate with, default to email. While texting is the dominant communication function on mobile, it can be too personal for a first communication. Email, at the moment, is the most generational neutral form of communication. After having a front row seat to today's communication challenges, I anticipate Generation Z, the post-millennial generation, will begin to finally streamline the workplace communications as they come of age. But until then, prefer to defer. Thanks for watching. I hope this content was insightful and useful. As an internationally recognized millennial generation.
So I guess the reason it's to me is that, yeah, I think we have to kind of learn to defer so that we can get the results that we're trying to get. Anyway, we have a lot of people. I'm going to change my view on here. Family members that can maybe chime in and tell a little bit. I've sent them some questions or thoughts or whatever, and I'm hoping that some of them will tell you how they manage to cross these lines and boundaries and things, especially having a 100-year-old in their midst. So,
Sheila, a couple of people wrote comments, and we didn't really get to see it, but maybe if you could ask them if they would just sort of tell us what they wrote as part of this, we'd like to hear from you.
Oh, okay. Chat, I'll put the chat on here. Here we go. Ah, okay. So let's start with, who was at the top? Bryn. Oh, yeah, okay. So Bryn, video is disabled for guests, not sure. Oh, okay, so I hope that may be fixed, I don't know. But Bryn, would you like to start?
I'll go and I'm putting I'm putting kids down. Give me, I'll go.
She's got twin 2.5-year-olds. So we will go to her mother, Trudy, my sister. Is she there?
I'm unmuting myself.
Oh.
And I think Brent's point was that we are not able to use our video. It's saying that that the host has disabled video, so none of us can have our pictures up. But anyway. So what I was saying in my text, and I appreciated what Shelley was saying about being short and everything followed by an emoji, and I've had to learn texting language, and so occasionally I'll have to say, oh wait, what does that mean, when I see some RTL or RT, let's see, roll on the floor laughing or something like that. Then I have to stop and say, okay, wait, what does that one mean? But there is an Urban Dictionary that we can always go to find the definitions of those little short texting languages. So, and one of the other things that I will say, and I saw that Siobhan made the same comment, text to talk is great to use, because I, for one, won't answer my phone if I don't recognize a phone number, whether it's my house phone, as my family well knows, or my cell phone. If I don't recognize the number, I'm not going to answer the phone. So text me first so I know who you are.
Interesting. Okay, and I'll go to Tyree next.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciated listening to the video we just saw with the gentleman, where he says that you should figure out what generation the person you're talking to is in, and then communicate with them that way. I understand that, but it's very taxing when you have a wide spread of generations you're trying to contact. For example, if we have a family party, there's 4 different generations, and to try to, okay, this one only does email, this one only does text, this one I have to call personally. You have to figure out, because I know now who responds to what. It used to be you could just send people an invitation and you send everybody the same thing. So I get what he's saying, but it's a lot of work to figure all that out and then respond to each group of people in a different way.
Yep. And Tyree is of my generation. And her daughter, Siobhan, is right next door with her hand raised. So I'll go to Siobhan.
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. So I am of what we'll call I hate this, geriatric millennial, the Zennial, that crossover group that wasn't necessarily Gen X as they've described, but I'm in my 40s. I am not a 20-year-old millennial. Actually, I'm hiring 20-year-old millennials and the alphas that come next to come work for me now. So it's a lot different. I have a lot of different thoughts to it, but what I'll say too, I think the talk to text that I was talking about, that one is actually a lifesaver for friends of mine. When someone was mentioning trying to have deeper discussions or have a better understanding of something, it's a great function that's on your cell phone where you can just talk and it'll write out your text message for you, and it can be a little longer. And that does work. I've also observed, because I have people that I work with on a daily basis of multiple generations, and we transitioned from being in an office to learning how to use technology because of COVID, we actually don't have phones in our offices anymore. The phone doesn't ring anymore, which was a big difference when we came back. And when we talk about how do we communicate now, we've all had to adapt and change. I noticed very early that like the younger people in the office would be really short on their responses on our chat and things like that. And you had to learn it's not because it's disrespect. There's so much more we're doing. I think my mom and I were talking about it one time because I went off a day for work and I came back and I had 300 emails and I was happy. That wasn't terrible. I mean, that's the reality now. And so when we say we need things in quick bites, there's so much more we're consuming in this world than we previously did, whether it's at work, whether it's about social injustice that's happening, or if it's choosing to get up at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning to talk about generations. We're doing so much more. So in order to kind of accommodate all of this learning and information that's happening, I think that's where shorter form communication can become beneficial, and it allows for somebody then to take the step if they want to learn more to kind of go through it. I'm on Instagram a lot. I post a lot about it because of things that are happening in the world. I want to spread information, but it's not for me to tell everybody how to do everything. I'm going to put the breadcrumbs down. So I kind of think some of the how do we communicate with each other, it isn't just generationally. There's just so much that we're trying to share with one another. How do we use the technology together? How can we make sure that others know what's happening too? And there's just so much out there. Trying to bring it together in smaller bites sometimes I feel like has been helpful, because I've gotten people on both sides of that to dig deeper or to want to engage in a conversation differently. And then from there, it's how do we engage in that conversation? And often it once you ask someone, it's not as terribly hard. Hey, can I call you real quick? Like Trudy said, I won't answer the number if I don't know who they are. I get 100 prank phone calls in a month from like robocalling and things. So now we want things to be more personal. And I think that's where initiating a conversation, hey, can I call you? I'll talk to you. And people will be on the go. Don't find that to be rude anymore. Like, I will talk to you, but maybe I'm out doing something. So sometimes I've witnessed where people think that is an issue, and it's really not. People communicate when and where they want to so that we can stay connected and engaged. And that was a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm going to give it over to all of my aunties that are on the phone.
Thank you. I see that Joshua, you just came on, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Ernie. Okay. We'll go to Ernie first.
Hello, everybody. I am one of the aunts, one of the daughters. I fall into all those categories, but I kind of want to mention that I'm closest to Betty's generation, but I also want to just say, Siobhan, you said a lot and you took it all around, and I liked that, even how you're finding at work, you're wanting to become more personal, because I think technology pulls us away from a lot of personal kind of connections. And Betty said something to Sheila and I one day. We were talking about something going on that was more common in the world that was kind of scary. And I can't remember specifically what it was, but she said, things are always changing and we get through it all. And I keep that in my heart because it's true. It's true in more ways than just the different generations. It's true in life. It's true in devastating things. It's true in wonderful things. But from my perspective also, I'm so glad I'm not working, because most of this seems to be something that in the work field you need your in-services about, because there's so many different close generations needing to be productive and working together. And so, but outside of the work field, dealing with all these generations, I think there's more onus on them in the sense that they're making most of the adjustments to deal with us, and in a very kind way. I know Siobhan recently, I'm like, oh, I got to do something on Teams. I've never heard of Teams. And she kind of walked me through it. It's like Zoom, but technology isn't my forte, but I love the email and I love the texting. And I'm having trouble a lot with Facebook, so I don't even want to get on it. And so my nieces and stuff know to send me something on my email that I can just click on to see what they're trying to show. So I think some of those things that I love the most is trying to stay open on both ends, whether I'm older or whether those of you who are really involved and engaged. I have grandchildren, I have a grandchild, and he's very patient with me. And he shows me things, and then a month later, I couldn't remember what he showed me, so he shows me again. And he learns to reach down and pull me up and make it okay. And that's also from others in the family. And so I think that I am very receptive to learning new things, even if they don't stick with me like they would with the Betty Creasy. I'm receptive to a lot of those generations. I'm very receptive to a Betty generation because it was formal. It was more oral. It was more written. And I can still use the oral and the written form with almost any age with certain things. So I want to hold on to some of the past, and I want to stay receptive to the future. So that's a general thing. I'm not sad about it. I'm always learning. I'm a work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and Tyrese got her hand up again.
I wanted to ask Betty, what's her favorite type of communication? Is it email? Is it texting? Is it phone calls? What does she like to use the most? What does she use the most?
Talking. I don't use any, well, I do. I use the emails but I never took typing. Sheila took typing, so it's easy for her to text. But I don't type with any of the modern stuff. So I just let them worry about hearing me. You know, if I call them and say, I need you to, I need to talk to you, they know they have to talk to me on the phone.
Okay, then let's try Joshua.
All right. Oh, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, sorry I'm a little late. But if I understand, here to talk about like communication between generations, and it's that using technology.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite and allowing me to be a part of this. I know Grandma Betty from my parents, who my dad lived with the family for a little bit when he was in college, and they've kept in contact ever since. And I've learned so much just from Grandma Betty. From actually, a lot of it is through food. That is how a lot of people, well, that's how I like to communicate. Sharing recipes, the story behind the food is amazing. It shows a lot about the culture and what people went through during the time when the recipes were created. And so, yeah, that's one way. And during work, I have to communicate a lot with with children, with people from the Generation Z, with what people call boomers and the silent generation and things like that. And what I learned is that each generation, even though we're different in age, right? There's some consistency throughout. You just have to find the common ground. Everyone has a thing that makes them, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like losing my train of thought here. Everyone has something that they strive for. They have something that says, this is what I want to be, and this is what I want to do. And actually, there's been some research with USC that shows that even though generations are different, generations are cyclical. So a lot of the common ground between the silent generation. There's actually a lot of common ground between the silent generation and the what is up and coming as generation or the Zoomers or Generation Z. And so it's up to us to kind of find out what makes each generation unique and also kind of find the common ground between them. I know I'm rambling, and I apologize for that, but that's how I've learned to kind of work with different generations, is to find the common ground between the different generations. And in using technology, honestly, maybe it's because of where I'm working, but I think a lot of it is people will kind of adapt to what's being used. It may take a little bit of time, but as long as people kind of strive to use it and it becomes common, I think everyone can, find a way to use it. Hopefully, that all made sense. I'm sorry if it doesn't.
Thank you. I do want to say that, as Joshua pointed out, he is the son of a father who was an exchange student or came from China as a student, lived with my parents. I don't know if Vonda's up there. My parents had a series of Chinese, my parents have had a series of people from around the world that have lived with them. So we have, we're still in communication with just about every single one of them. And Joshua, I think the real story that my mom would probably really like to tell is about when he was 13, he called her, and my parents were living in Arizona, and Joshua lives here in Southern California, and asked, could they come to Mom's house and celebrate Thanksgiving, an American Thanksgiving. And one of the ways that my mother manages to communicate across generational lines is she actually went out and she and my father had extra leaves built for the table. They built them so that everybody could sit at the same table. Joshua, I guess you brought cheesecake, and Joshua brought everybody brought something to the dinner. Mom was not going to allow people to go back and sleep after everybody ate, and so they all sat around the table and shared, including Joshua's grandparents, who are from China, and there was probably having to be translation going on between all of them. Some of the children were young children, but everybody was sharing with everybody at the same table. And that's kind of my mom's style. And as she says, talking is one of the ways that she definitely manages to cross these boundaries. But to have a 13-year-old call you, not his parents, but he called and asked to have dinner at my parents' house. Oh, okay. So, Bong, are you there? Can you chime in?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm a late baby boomer, and I certainly have my share of frustration, challenge working with my millennials on cross-generational communication. One example came to my mind when I was watching this gentleman's video talking about workplace. So I have two millennials in late 20s, and one of them insisted that I use Slack. I had never heard of the word Slack, but apparently it's commonly used in workplace, at least a few years back. I'm not sure if it's still as prevalent. And I had so much trouble adapting to this because everything we had to do, whether being a vacation, family scheduling, something related to the apartment business. We had subfolders established. So I had to type into this Slack in order to say, Diana, could you please look into this? Or Sophia, could you please? So I had so much trouble with that thing. But I have to say, I think it is so true that no matter how challenging it is, you have to find their way of communicating in order to be effective. So as difficult as it could be, because I didn't want to. I mean, I've got enough of modes of communication. Why do I have to go to another one? But in the end, it didn't work out. So that is my thoughts when I was watching the video earlier. Yes, I am another very fortunate foreign students that was hosted by the Creases 30 some years ago, and I have become part of the family ever since, and too many stories to share, many of them probably known to the group, at least the group online here, and very fortunate to have been part of the family and grow with the family like just today, and learning something new and sharing what I know. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other onliners that wanted to chime in that haven't? Oh, okay. Randy's got it.
I wanted to just share one other thing about communication and really communicating with Betty. I think during COVID, it really helped people in a lot of ways learning these technologies, whether it was the Slack or Zoom or any of the different ones, even how to use PowerPoint or set up a video. But because there's so many ways to communicate now, I actually think our communication is also more intentional. So like when I talked to Betty when we were over at my house a couple weeks ago, the conversation can be more direct about something. Excuse me. I think we're all choosing to be intentional about what we want to talk about and learn from generations. And a big thing I've noticed, especially with younger generations coming up right now, there's so much talk about who they are as individuals and being seen as who you are and where you come from. And in order to do that, you need to learn your past and understand where you've come from. And I think Betty's done a beautiful job of sharing her stories that are so relatable across generations, because as someone else mentioned, things are very cyclical. The moments that were happening 50, 60 years ago are now coming back again. And you have this experience of people who lived them, now whether we all listen or not, but who've experienced things. I've noticed more and more generations want to come together and learn. Cooking is a great example of that does cross the divide, because one of my cousins and I were talking about family recipes, and it used to be they were shared orally, but now we're not next to each other as much anymore. And so we have to write them down and we have to talk to the people who know them so that we can have them. And I think that's a great way when we're looking for ways to connect. It's remembering where we came from and kind of connecting as a tradition. And that has to evolve as we move further away from each other. And we want to keep recognizing the identities of where we came from. So again, just another way that we can communicate across generations. And I've seen it with Betty every year when we go to the slumber party, getting a chance to talk about things and being very intentional about the conversations you want to have when there's so many different communication forms.
Thank you. And let's actually go back to Bryn, if she can chime in.
Hi, I can. And I actually have Diamond here. She says she doesn't want to, she's a little shy, but we were chatting as we were listening to this. I think I agree with everyone. I relate most with Siobhan. I guess I'm technically a millennial, which I really am not a fan of that, being part of that generation because they get a bad rap. But I too am, I guess, on the early end of that. So I'd say I'm a mix between is that Gen X and millennial. And I find that a lot with the way I communicate. I much prefer, I mean, I use text for certain reasons, but particularly at work, it frustrates me, like texting work stuff. Like I would much prefer, I know someone was mentioning how she wants to get on the phone and nobody does. I much prefer to get on the phone as well. And so I know that's unlike millennials in many ways. we even, Vaughn mentioned challenged with communicating across generations. Our oldest daughters are Gen Z. I can't keep up with all these names. And we had to have a conversation around, everything's not meant for text message, right? Like talking about, I don't even know, but, or if we need to have a serious conversation, it's probably more appropriate to have it in person or over the phone, because you can't always tell tone in text and stuff like that, and things get misconstrued. So there's those challenges in trying to bridge the gap on, our ways of communicating and not wanting to communicate, everything in the text message. But I will say, I think my grandma, Betty, has done an amazing job of adapting to communicate with all generations, because she is open-minded and willing to learn and willing to try new things. She downplayed her skill sets a few minutes ago when she was talking. She is on Facebook, not as much as the rest of us, or Trudy, who's an addict, but she's on there. So that's a way that she communicates and stays connected. There's times where she's like, did you see that X, Y, and Z happen? Because she happened to pop onto Facebook and see something, within the family happened. She embraced Zoom, especially during the pandemic, when that was really the way that we communicated. She can log in to Zoom on her own. She's typically the first one there. I don't know a whole lot of 100-year-olds who are savvy enough to get on the computer, log into Zoom, and be waiting for the rest of us to join her. So I think there's something to be said just about being open-minded, as and Betty's a great example of that, of as you are communicating with generations, across the board, being open-minded and learning how to adjust for what works, for everyone. It's not by coincidence that Betty has the legacy that she does and has touched as many people's lives as she has, including my kids, who, enjoy sitting around and listening to, her tell stories and talk and hopping on Zoom with her as well. So you have to be, I know Vaughn mentioned being intentional. You have to be intentional. And although there's so many different forms of communication, it's important to stay open-minded and figure it out. And I think Betty is done a great job of showing folks how to do that. She's successful in that.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to something that's come up a couple times in the conversation here about, can we just talk at work? And I'm born in 1960. I'm still working, and one of the tricks that I've found is useful is to just a lot of people don't pick up the phone. I mean, my phone rarely rings at work, but you can schedule a teleconference on Teams with just one person. And that actually works, because that gives them the opportunity to say, oh, I'm available then. Yes, we can get together. And then sometimes they'll forward that message to somebody else who they want to have join in the conversation. But if you make the verbal the conversation a scheduled event, then that gives them a little more flexibility to manage it. And, in Teams, you can do the text messaging and all that stuff too. So, I found that seems to work, especially when I'm working with, people who are the age of my children instead of my age.
And I think that's very true, because we have family scheduled Zooms every week, and that's how we communicate a lot.
That sounds smart. I'm thinking, as we talk about this, and I'm looking at this sign here about communicating at MBCC, and I'm thinking, this is the adult discussion group. I'm thinking, is anybody under 18 here? I don't think so. So, yeah. Well, yeah, but here we are. Our median generation is probably baby boomer, and we do have some silence and whatnot. So, and I think this is a terrific group with a lot of great ideas in it, and really smart and willing to hear each other out and everything. So it's wonderful. But it would be really super if we could bring in a few more Gen Zs and some millennials and even some older, well, not quite time for the Yeah, but eventually we'll get some of those alphas. But we ought to be thinking about whether we got, and I'm not laying this on people who are organizers, everybody can think about this, whether we can come up with some topics that might draw in a few younger people that we'd still be, we old folks would also be interested in. So if we ever do get this, we get a young person in, let's listen to them. let's try to, be interested in what they have to say. I'm sure they might contribute something. So that's a thought that might be a way to sort of add some of this discussion having an effect on our church lives.
One of the things that I have been concerned with, Ron's sister Ernie, who spoke a few minutes ago, is a teacher of the deafblind. She met Helen Keller when she was 9 years old and became a teacher. I think there's only 7 or 8 in the country that holds the credentials that she does. We, I think, would be very, it would be good if we at least had a sign language, an interpreter every Sunday at church. I mean, I've thought a lot about that, and she was interpreting for a church for several years, and it's, just because we don't need it doesn't mean that we couldn't attract people to come if we had someone there that was doing that. And so that's one of the things that I even kind of asked her about and looked into and thought that I might even fund it if we ever managed to kind of get around to it. But I think we really at MBC have to be very intentional about our thinking and how we incorporate and get young people. If we've got a panel, I think it should always have some young people on it. So I don't know, just my thought. Anybody else?
Well, I got just a comment on that, Sheila. These
Yes,
days,
go ahead.
anyone under 70 is a young person to me, so I'm all for that.
Say what?
He said anyone under 70 counts as young.
Oh. Okay. Yes. Here.
Oh, Sheila, I've got it.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to beat this like a dead horse, but we went to the family retreat that was organized, I think, kind of by Mike, and there was a variety of ages there. We got to meet some young families that we'd never met before and meet their kids. There was a group of about 14 kids. I don't know if they knew each other, but they certainly had a wonderful time together. And it was pretty well attended, but it would be great to have it even better attended. I hope they're going to do it again, because for Tony and for me, that was such an unanticipated opportunity. I mean, we thought it was going to be interesting, but getting to know those young, so now at coffee hour, we go say, hey, how's it going? We got the little girl that wore the yellow boots 24/7. I go, where's your yellow boots? And she kind of looks at me like, huh? But it was, I did a thing on the labyrinth there, and a lot of people came, a lot of kids came, and that yellow boot little girl, she ran around there about 20 times. Her mom's going, no, no, no. I said, no, that's good. And eventually she figured out how to negotiate it and did it. It was miraculous, actually. It's kind of miraculous. And I think the other message that's been loud and clear here today is accept the fact that there's change, adapt, and go forward.
Anybody else have any comments? Someone on Zoom has a comment.
Oh, it's not. That's the reason I was saying that my hope is that the Alpha group our youngest ones. My 13-year-old great-grandson has a much more vocabulary for all ages. And if you just concentrate on those young kids, they have so much more fulfill the things that we need to do, like being the most diverse. There's every kind. You look around this world and all you see is mixed kids. And that's what my suggestion is.
Didn't you say there was someone on Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was me. This isn't a very serious comment. It was just meant to add in my thing. This is something with the generational differences. I miss the days of the good old house phone with no call waiting, and like if you were out at out at an event during the day, you were enjoying the event. And if people were calling you, you check your voicemail, your answering machine, not your voicemail, your answering machine, and you call them back. I do think that's one thing about technology. Technology is great. But I do feel like it takes folks away sometimes from what's happening and back to communicating and being present with those that are there. You often see people at concerts or events and they just are recording the whole thing. And I'm like, are you watching it or are you just, is your phone just recording the situation? What's going on? And so I often tell the kids, my older kids, I'm like, y'all just don't even know like the idea of being unavailable. Like if you go out with your parents, you're out with your parents and you're in the moment and you check back in with your friends when you get back in the house. So I think there's a lot of great things about technology, but I think there's ways we have to figure out too to make sure with the technology we continue to stay present, like we were back in the day. That's my final statement.
Thank you. Who? Trudy.
And one of the other things I was going to say is, and it's funny because I'm probably the one that interrupts Bryn when she's trying to stay present in the moment because I'm texting her, are you at home? Oh, no, I'm out. So I'm the guilty mother. But the other thing that I want to say too is that there comes a point when we do learn a lot from those younger generations. I know there are times when I reach out to Siobhan, to Bryn, and I get advice and I'm like, oh my gosh, who are you? Like, are you the kid that I raised that was a snotty teenager who's really giving me great advice professionally? And, there are times when I've had challenges in my own career and my daughter has talked me off of the ledge. So they do learn a lot. So we learn a lot from them.
Yes, I think as the kind of a final statement, yeah, I think we all need to be open to learning from each other and sharing with each other and living our lives together and learning to I like that, accept, adapt, and change. So anyway, I am going to tell you a little bit about next week. It's still in formulation. As my mother will tell you, I tend to perform best under pressure, so it sort of comes together at the last minute. But in the meantime, it can be miserable to other people in my family. But
so we know what you'll be doing next week, next Saturday at midnight, right?
Not quite that bad. I did have to learn to change that after I left college and I had other responsibilities like children. But one of my childhood friends since I was 4 years old is Stephanie Daly, and she lives in Washington, D.C., has for many years, and has worked for the State Department and the as a translator. She speaks 8 different languages, I think it is, something like that. Anyway, her last job was with the National Institute of Health, and she has a lot of, she was doing senior things. I will kind of let her explain, or I will get her bio and as I introduce her, give you a little bit more information. But she's sort of the kickoff, and I'm hoping that we have a discussion as well next week so that we can share resources with one another. This morning was, what was I? Anyway, it's flitted from my mind. There was a resource that I ran across this morning. Anyway, I forgot where it was even, or whatever, but things that you can share with others that maybe just, you know, I need a window washer right now. My window washer of 40 years, retired. How do we manage to share within our own community and within the world? Oh, great. Gloria raised her hand, and I maybe I've solved one of my challenges. But anyway, resources of all types. One of the things that I would love to do in our own neighborhood is have a list of different tools that people have. My neighbor next door is woodworking, and so he has all the saws and the equipment and all of those kinds of things. If we have an emergency, I know that the CERT has, you know, really requested that we all know our neighbors well enough so that we check on them and all of those things in these seem to be ever occurring disasters and emergencies. So anyway, we're kicking off of, it's basically sharing resources is the idea. So please come with any good resources that you have, bring them along, and, you know, let's share them together. That's it. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah. Can we just close real quick with a prayer? There's so much going on now in Hawaii. It's just heartbreaking. Lord, we just ask you to be with those people, that you will take care of them, that you will stop the fires, that you will help the paramedics and police and all those. And we just ask you to just settle this down and make it go away in general. We thank you very much in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, all the online people.